I heard my husband's voice through a hospital door, and in a single sentence, he erased 7 years of my life. Once the partnership is official, I file for divorce. There was a brief pause. Then he laughed. Until then, she keeps paying the bills. Another voice answered, my younger sister. She'll never see it coming. Then came my mother's calm, familiar voice. Adeline has always been the responsible one. She'll survive. No one knew I was standing less than 4 feet away, holding a gift bag wrapped in pale blue paper. Inside was a hand-stitched baby blanket I'd ordered 3 weeks earlier. I didn't cry. I didn't walk into the room. I simply turned around, and in that quiet hallway, I unknowingly made the most important decision of my life. I decided that none of them would learn I knew the truth. Until it was far too late. My name is Adeline Carter. I'm 35 years old. For almost my entire life, I believed that being dependable was enough. Not lovable, not unforgettable, just dependable. If something broke, I fixed it. If someone needed money, I found it. If there was an uncomfortable conversation, somehow I always became the person expected to smooth everything over. My younger sister, Deline, had always lived differently. She was the bright one, the charming one, the daughter my mother couldn't stop protecting. If Deline made a mistake, it became someone else's fault. If I made one, it became a lesson about responsibility. Looking back now, I realize our family had been teaching us our roles since we were children. Deline was allowed to be fragile. I was expected to be useful. By 35, I thought I had built a life no one could take from me. I was marketing director for a national healthcare company in Denver. It had taken me more than a decade of 80-hour weeks, skipped vacations, and endless business trips to reach that position. I was proud of it, not because of the title, because no one had handed it to me. Every promotion had been earned. 7 years earlier, I'd married Weston Hale. He wasn't wealthy. Neither was I. We built everything together, or that's what I believed. Weston worked in commercial real estate. He had charisma that filled every room. People trusted him within minutes of meeting him. I used to think that was his greatest gift. Now I know it was his greatest weapon. The first years of our marriage felt ordinary in the best possible way. Saturday mornings making pancakes, weekend hikes in the Rockies, movie nights where we'd fall asleep before the ending. We talked about children constantly. Names, schools, vacations we'd take one day. I honestly believed we'd grow old arguing about which grandchild was the funniest. Life had other plans. My first pregnancy ended at 11 weeks. The second lasted 14. The third, I never even reached the first ultrasound. Each loss took something different from me. The first stole excitement. The second stole confidence. The third stole certainty. By then, hospitals no longer smelled hopeful. They smelled familiar. Weston cried with me after the first miscarriage, held my hand through the second. By the third, he mostly stared at the floor. I assumed grief had simply exhausted him. People process pain differently. That's what every counselor told us, so I believed it. Fertility treatments followed. Hormone injections, blood tests, appointments before sunrise, insurance battles, savings accounts disappearing one invoice at a time. I never complained. I wanted our family badly enough that every sacrifice seemed worth making. Weston said the same. At least, he used to. Then something shifted. Not overnight. Quietly. He stopped asking how appointments went. His phone became impossible to borrow. Work dinners multiplied. Weekend conferences appeared out of nowhere. When I asked questions, he always had answers. Reasonable answers. The kind that made me feel guilty for asking in the first place. So eventually, I stopped asking. My coworker Marisol noticed before I did. We were eating lunch one afternoon when she casually asked, "Everything okay with Weston?" I looked up. "Why?" "I don't know." She shrugged. "He used to come pick you up after late meetings." "He doesn't anymore." I laughed. "He's just busy." She smiled politely, but there was something in her eyes. Concern. The kind friends wear when they're trying not to interfere. I changed the subject. I wasn't ready to examine my marriage through someone else's eyes. Meanwhile, Deline announced she was pregnant. She refused to identify the father, said he wanted privacy. Mom accepted that explanation immediately. I didn't. Not because I suspected anything. Because Deline had never been a private person. She posted what she had for breakfast. But somehow, the father of her child had become a state secret. Still, it wasn't my business. So I congratulated her, bought baby clothes, offered to help decorate the nursery. She politely declined every offer. At the time, I thought she wanted independence. Now I know she wanted distance. The morning she went into labor, I woke before sunrise. I drove across town to a boutique that specialized in handmade baby gifts. I chose the softest gray blanket they had, asked them to embroider the baby's initials in ivory thread. I bought a small wooden keepsake box, a stuffed elephant, even a children's book my father used to read to me. The woman wrapping everything smiled. "First, nephew?" "My first." "You must be excited." "I really am." And I meant it. Every word. Weston was already dressed when I got home. Navy suit, silver tie, favorite watch. He kissed my forehead while adjusting his cufflinks. "I won't make it to the hospital." "Big meeting?" "Huge. If this deal closes today," he smiled, "everything changes." I kissed him. "Good luck." "You too." Then he grabbed his briefcase. At the front door, he turned around. "Tell Deline." He hesitated just long enough for me to notice. "Tell her I'm proud of her." It felt like an unusual thing to say. Not wrong. Just oddly personal. I remember thinking about it for perhaps 2 seconds. Then I let it go. One more strange moment added to a growing collection. The maternity floor was surprisingly quiet. Nurses walked briskly between rooms. Some families laughed. Others cried. New life has a way of creating every emotion at once. I checked in at reception. Room 412. The nurse smiled. "Congratulations, Auntie." The words warmed me. I picked up the gift bag. Walked toward the room. Smiling. The door wasn't fully closed. Just slightly open. I lifted my hand to knock. Then I heard Weston's voice. My heart skipped. For one ridiculous second, I thought he'd surprised everyone. Maybe his meeting had ended early. Maybe he'd rushed over because family mattered more. I almost smiled. Then I heard what he actually said. "She still believes I'm at work." Silence. Then Deline laughed softly. "She always believes you." Weston answered immediately. "She trusts me." Another voice. My mother's. "Let's not waste today talking about Adeline." I froze, completely. Every instinct told me to leave. Every instinct told me to listen. I couldn't move. Weston lowered his voice. "As long as the partnership goes through next month." "Nothing changes," Deline asked quietly. "And after?" His answer came without hesitation. "I file for divorce." My breathing stopped. "I've waited long enough." Mom spoke again. "You've both been patient. It'll finally be over." Then Weston said the sentence that would replay in my mind for months. "Until then, Adeline keeps paying for the life we're building." No hesitation. No guilt. No remorse. Just certainty. As though my entire marriage had been reduced to a line item in a financial plan. A baby whimpered. Someone picked him up. I heard Weston laugh. Not the polite laugh he used with clients. Not the tired laugh he'd given me lately. A genuine one. Warm. Happy. Proud. Then, the words that shattered whatever hope I still had. "Hey there, buddy." "I know. Daddy's here." Everything inside me went completely still. Not because I misunderstood, because I understood perfectly. The baby inside that room wasn't simply my nephew. He was my husband's son. I stepped backward so quietly that even my own footsteps seemed distant. The gift bag suddenly felt impossibly heavy. I kept walking. Past the nurses. Past the elevators. Past a young father proudly showing pictures of his newborn to anyone willing to look. I don't remember reaching the parking garage, only sitting inside my car, hands gripping the steering wheel. Unable to breathe. Unable to think. Unable to understand how 7 years of marriage had collapsed in less than 2 minutes. I stared at the gift on the passenger seat. The tiny blanket. The little elephant. The keepsake box. Everything I'd chosen with love. For the child my husband had secretly created with my own sister. I finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. I simply bent forward until my forehead rested against the steering wheel. And I cried harder than I had after all 3 miscarriages combined, because those losses had been cruel. This one had been chosen by the people I loved most. 20 minutes later, the tears stopped. Not because I felt better, because something colder had taken their place. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, but my voice, when I finally spoke, was steady. "No," I whispered. "You don't get to decide how this story ends." I started the engine, and instead of driving home, I drove to the nearest coffee shop, because before I confronted anyone, I needed one thing: the truth. The coffee shop was almost empty. A college student worked quietly behind a laptop near the window. An older couple shared a blueberry muffin in the corner. A barista called out someone's order. Life continued exactly as it always had. Mine had ended less than 30 minutes earlier. I ordered a black coffee. I had no intention of drinking and chose the table farthest from everyone else. The gift bag rested in the chair beside me. For a long time, I simply stared at my phone. One decision sat in front of me. Call Weston, or don't. If I called him now, he'd lie. Maybe he'd panic. Maybe he'd confess. Either way, the advantage would disappear. I remembered something my father used to tell me whenever negotiations became emotional. The first person to show their cards usually loses. I unlocked my phone. Not to call my husband, to open our bank account. Weston had never worried about our finances. Ironically, that was because I'd always handled them. Bills, mortgage, retirement contributions, taxes, insurance, monthly budgeting. He used to joke that numbers bored him. I married the smartest woman in the room, he'd say. I don't have to think about spreadsheets anymore. Back then, it sounded like trust. Now, I wondered if it had been convenience. Nothing looked unusual at first. Mortgage payment, electric bill, insurance, groceries, the ordinary rhythm of married life. Then I stopped looking at the account balance and started looking at patterns. One payment caught my attention. A transfer, $6,000. 9 months earlier, recipient, de Morales. I frowned. Morales. Delene had never changed her last name. She'd always been Delene Carter. So who was Morales? I opened the transaction. The memo line simply read, family support. I couldn't remember approving it. I searched the account history. Another transfer. 3 months later, $8,000. Same recipient. Another, $5,000. Then another, $10,000. Every few weeks. Always different amounts. Always from our joint account. By the time I finished scrolling, there were 11 transfers. Total, $50,400. My stomach tightened. That wasn't an accident. It wasn't generosity. It was a system. I logged into our credit card account. Nothing. Then another card. Nothing again. The third account made my pulse quicken. Furniture. Baby store. Crib. Changing table. Nursery lighting. Designer stroller. More than $12,000 over 7 months. All delivered to the same address. I copied it into my notes. I'd never seen that address before. My phone vibrated. Weston. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Seconds later, a text arrived. Meeting finally ended. How's my nephew? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was perfect. He was standing beside his own son, asking me about my nephew. I typed slowly. He's beautiful. Delene is doing great. His reply came immediately. Wish I could have been there. The lie was so effortless, it almost impressed me. I opened our cloud storage. We used it for tax documents, vacation photos, and household paperwork. Weston almost never logged into it himself. He'd asked me years ago to organize everything. I clicked through folders one by one. Insurance, receipts, mortgage, then a folder labeled simply, property. Inside were dozens of PDFs. One immediately caught my attention. Lease agreement. The address matched the furniture deliveries. I opened it. Luxury apartment. Downtown Denver. 2 bedrooms. Signed 11 months earlier. Monthly rent, $4,900. Then I reached the signature page. My name. My signature. At least, something pretending to be it. Most people wouldn't notice. I did immediately. The angle of the A, the shape of the T, the final stroke. Someone had copied my handwriting. Poorly. For several minutes, I simply stared at the page. This wasn't just betrayal. Someone had signed legal documents using my identity. Whether Weston had done it himself, or someone else had, didn't matter. The document existed, which meant someone believed I was legally responsible for that apartment. I saved a copy, then another, then emailed both versions to an address Weston didn't know existed, a private email I'd created years earlier for backup copies of important financial records. For the first time that afternoon, I began thinking clearly. I needed help. Not from friends, not from family. Family had already chosen their side. There was only one person I trusted, Meredith Collins. We'd shared a dorm room in college. She'd become one of Colorado's most respected family law attorneys. We still had dinner every month. She'd represented CEOs, professional athletes, politicians. She also happened to know me better than almost anyone alive. I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Please tell me you're inviting me to lunch. I need legal advice. She went silent immediately. What happened? I looked out the coffee shop window. Then I said quietly, "My husband has another family." She didn't interrupt. Not once. I spent nearly 40 minutes telling her everything. The hospital, the conversation, the baby, the transfers, the apartment, the lease. When I finally finished, she asked only one question. "Did you confront him?" "No." "Good." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "That's horrible." Just, "Good." "Listen carefully," Meredith said. "Everything you do over the next few weeks matters. I want you to pretend today never happened." "I don't know if I can." "You can? Because right now, your husband believes he's winning. And people who think they're winning become careless." I closed my eyes. What if I want to scream? "You will. Later. But not today," she continued. "I also don't want you investigating alone. I know enough." "No, you know enough to be dangerous." "That's different." She paused. "I'm bringing someone in." "Who?" "A licensed private investigator." I hesitated. "Isn't that extreme?" "Adeline." Her voice softened. "Your husband has apparently maintained another household for at least a year. He may have committed financial fraud. You've already found nearly $60,000. If there's more, we need to find it before he starts hiding it." We agreed to meet the following morning. Before hanging up, she gave me one final instruction. "When Weston gets home tonight, act exactly like yourself. No accusations. No cold shoulder. No strange questions. Nothing. I hate this." "I know. But remember, the person with the truth controls the timeline." I finally stood up. The coffee beside me had gone cold. I carried the gift bag back to my car. For a moment, I considered throwing it away. Instead, I placed it carefully in the trunk. Not because anyone in that hospital deserved it, but because one day, I wanted to remember exactly who I had been before everything changed. That evening, Weston walked through the front door smiling. He smelled faintly of hospital disinfectant and expensive cologne. "How's the baby?" he asked while loosening his tie. "Healthy. And Aline?" "Tired." He nodded knowingly. "I can imagine." "Can you?" I wondered. "Or do you remember because you were there holding your son?" Instead, I smiled. "She asked about you." He didn't miss a beat. "I feel terrible I couldn't make it." Another lie. Smooth, practiced, completely believable. If I hadn't stood outside room 412, I would have believed it too. That night he fell asleep within minutes. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Around 2 a.m, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Just once. He didn't wake. The screen lit up for only a second. Long enough for me to read the sender's name. D, no last name, no message preview, just a heart. I slowly reached for the phone. My hands were steady. His face remained relaxed. I entered the passcode I'd watched him use hundreds of times. The phone unlocked. I opened the messages, and what I saw in the very first conversation made me realize the hospital had only revealed a fraction of the truth. The bedroom was almost completely dark. Only the soft glow from Weston's phone illuminated the nightstand. I looked at him, still asleep, one arm stretched across my side of the bed, breathing slowly, peacefully. For a brief, irrational moment, I wondered how someone carrying so many lies could sleep so well. Then I picked up the phone. The passcode hadn't changed. Our anniversary, 7 years together, reduced to 4 numbers protecting conversations that had destroyed our marriage. The phone unlocked instantly. I opened the message thread marked only with a red heart. There were hundreds of messages. Not dozens. Hundreds! The oldest was nearly 2 years old. My chest tightened. This hadn't begun after our fertility struggles. It had begun while I was still believing we were trying to save our marriage. I forced myself not to read everything. Meredith's voice echoed in my head. "Don't get emotional. Get organized." So instead of reading from the beginning, I started with the most recent messages. "Deline." He finally fell asleep. A picture followed. Beckett wrapped in a blue blanket. Weston had replied seconds later. "He looks perfect." Then another message. "I wish I could stay tonight." Deline answered. "Soon you won't have to leave anymore." I swallowed hard. Then I reached the message that made my stomach turn. How did Addie react? Weston's response came almost immediately. "She believes I was in meetings all day." Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. He'd sent that message less than an hour after hugging me in our kitchen. After asking about my nephew, After lying directly to my face, I took screenshots, every single one, then emailed them to the private account I'd created that afternoon. Only afterward did I delete the sent notifications from his phone. He would never know they were gone. The deeper I searched, the stranger things became. There were conversations about furniture, mortgage payments, doctor's appointments, baby names. One message stopped me cold. It had been sent almost 5 months earlier. Weston, the promotion interview went well. Once I make partner, we can finally stop pretending. Deline had answered with a single sentence. I'm tired of sharing you. I stared at those words for a long time. Sharing you? They weren't acting like two people having an affair. They were acting like a couple temporarily living apart. I had never been the wife. Not in their minds. I had been the obstacle. The next morning, I met Meredith in her office before work. She didn't waste time with sympathy. She handed me coffee, opened a legal pad, then asked, "What do we actually know?" I appreciated that. Facts, not feelings. So together we built a timeline. Affair began at least 2 years ago. Pregnancy roughly 10 months ago. Apartment leased 11 months ago. Large transfers over 10 months. Hospital conversation yesterday. Forgery discovered yesterday. Messages recovered overnight. Meredith leaned back. This isn't random. It's organized. A knock interrupted us. The man who entered looked nothing like the private investigators I'd seen in movies. No trench coat. No sunglasses. Just jeans, a navy blazer, and a tablet tucked under one arm. Adeline? He smiled politely. I'm Daniel Brooks. Meredith stood. Daniel specializes in financial investigations. He shook my hand. I'm sorry we have to meet under these circumstances. His voice was calm, measured, exactly the kind of person you wanted handling a disaster. For nearly an hour, Daniel asked questions I never would have thought to ask myself. Who handled your taxes? Whose name is on the mortgage? Who manages household passwords? Who recommended the leasing company? Has Weston ever asked you to sign blank documents? Some questions seemed unrelated, until he explained. Fraud rarely exists by itself. If someone is willing to forge one document, they usually become comfortable bending other rules too. He opened a spreadsheet on his tablet. I'm less interested in proving the affair. I frowned. Why? Because the affair doesn't win your case. He tapped the screen. The money does. The forged documents do. The timeline does. He looked directly at me. People cheat every day. Not everyone commits financial fraud while doing it. By the end of the meeting, we had a plan. Daniel would quietly investigate the apartment. Confirm who actually lived there. Check public records. Verify vehicle registrations. Look for anything connected to Weston's finances that hadn't surfaced yet. Meanwhile, Meredith would begin preparing divorce paperwork, not to file immediately. To be ready, the difference mattered. Preparation wasn't action. Preparation gave us options. For the next 10 days, my life split into 2 completely different worlds. Every morning I kissed Weston goodbye before work. Every evening we ate dinner together. We watched television, discussed groceries, argued about whose turn it was to take the trash out. If anyone had walked into our house, they would have seen an ordinary married couple. Meanwhile, my phone filled with encrypted emails from Meredith and Daniel. Every few hours, another piece of the puzzle arrived. On the 8th day, Daniel called. I found something. His tone was different. Careful. What is it? I've confirmed Weston spends 3 to 4 nights every week at the apartment. I closed my eyes. What else? He doesn't introduce himself there as Weston Hale. My eyes opened. What? Daniel took a breath. Neighbors know him by another name. My heart began pounding. What name? Beckett's father? No. I mean, what surname? Daniel looked down at his notes. They believe the family living there is... He paused. Weston and Deline Morales. Silence filled the line. They're presenting themselves as husband and wife. That evening I stood in my own kitchen making pasta while Weston talked casually about an upcoming client dinner. I watched him pour wine into 2 glasses. He looked comfortable, relaxed, at home, only now. I wasn't sure which home that actually was. You okay? He asked. I smiled. Long day. He nodded sympathetically. You've been working too hard. The irony almost made me laugh. The next afternoon, Daniel called again. This time, he didn't bother with small talk. I've got surveillance photos. They confirm everything. What do they show? Weston leaving the apartment carrying Beckett. Another photo. Deline kissing him goodbye. Another, the three of them shopping together. Then Daniel's voice became quieter. There is one more photograph. What is it? It's why I wanted to call instead of emailing. My pulse quickened. Daniel, what happened? He exhaled slowly. The photograph wasn't taken outside the apartment. It was taken outside a fertility clinic. I felt every muscle in my body tense. They weren't there after the baby was born. No. Daniel paused. The timestamp is from almost 18 months ago, before the pregnancy, before any of this should have existed. Then he said the words that changed everything. Adeline, I don't think Beckett was an accident. I think they planned him. I didn't speak for several seconds. Daniel waited. He understood silence. Some news isn't processed through words first. It's processed through memories. Suddenly, dozens of moments I'd buried over the last 2 years began rearranging themselves. Weston insisting we postpone another IVF cycle because of a major client project. Deline disappearing for an entire weekend, claiming she was attending a wellness retreat. The unexplained withdrawals. The apartment. The hospital. None of it had happened by chance. It had been planned, piece by piece, while I was still trying to save my marriage. Are you sure? I finally asked. Daniel answered carefully. I'm sure they visited the fertility clinic together. I can't legally tell you why. Medical records are protected. But I can tell you this. They arrived together. They left together. And over the next 6 months, they visited 4 more times. He slid another folder across Meredith's conference table. Parking records, security photographs, timestamps, dates. Every appointment lined up almost perfectly with the period before. Deline became pregnant. Meredith quietly closed the folder. They've built another family. She looked at me, and they've been building it for a long time. I expected to feel rage. Instead, I felt something stranger, relief. Not because of what I'd learned, because uncertainty was finally disappearing. There was no mystery left. No more wondering whether Weston loved me, whether he regretted the affair, whether our marriage could somehow be repaired. It couldn't. Because there wasn't just another woman. There was another life, and I had simply been financing it. Daniel leaned forward. I think it's time we stop asking what Weston did. Meredith looked at him. What do you mean? We should ask, who helped him? I frowned. My mother. We already know about Karen. I'm talking about everyone else. He began writing names on a legal pad. Accountant, leasing agent, bank manager, co-workers. Someone had processed forged paperwork. Someone had approved financial transfers. Someone had looked the other way. Large schemes almost never belonged to one person. They depended on people who stopped asking questions. 3 days later, Daniel called again. I've confirmed something. What? The apartment isn't just leased. It's furnished exactly like a family home. I wasn't surprised. They plan to live there. No. His voice became quieter. They already do. What? Weston stays there most weekdays. I blinked. Most? He usually comes back to your house after 10 or 11 at night. I remembered every late dinner, every delayed flight, every client dinner, every networking event. None of them had been real. He hadn't been working late. He'd been coming home. From home. That evening, Weston cooked dinner. One of the things that had made me fall in love with him years ago. Garlic butter salmon, roasted vegetables, fresh bread. He poured me a glass of wine. You've seemed distracted lately. I smiled. Big campaign at work. He nodded sympathetically. I know you'll figure it out. I watched him across the table. Same face, same voice, same wedding ring. Everything looked familiar. Except now I knew that somewhere across Denver, another dining table existed. Another family probably ate together. Another woman watched him smile exactly like this. After dinner, he stepped outside to take a phone call. I watched through the kitchen window. His entire expression changed. He smiled differently. Softer. He laughed. Then he looked toward the street before lowering his voice. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. When he came back inside, he looked almost guilty. Client? I asked casually. He nodded immediately. Yeah. Losing his mind over a contract. Another lie. I wondered whether lying had become automatic, or whether he still remembered what honesty felt like. The following Monday, Meredith invited me to her office. When I arrived, Daniel was already there. Neither of them looked particularly happy. What happened? Meredith handed me a document. It's the forensic report. My heart skipped. The signature. I opened the report. Every page strengthened the same conclusion. The lease had not been signed by me. Stroke pressure inconsistent, letter formation unnatural. Evidence of tracing, probability of authenticity, extremely low. I looked up. So it's official? Meredith nodded. As official as it gets. This document wouldn't survive 10 minutes in court. I exhaled slowly. For weeks I'd known the signature wasn't mine. Now, someone else had confirmed it. Someone whose opinion carried legal weight. Meredith closed the folder. This changes everything. How? Before today, we suspected fraud. Now, we can prove it. That afternoon, another unexpected email arrived. Not from Daniel. Not from Meredith. From my bank. The subject line read, "Loan verification request." I frowned. I hadn't applied for a loan. I opened the message. It referenced my name, my social security number, and a recent inquiry connected to residential financing. I called the bank immediately. After several minutes on hold, a representative answered. "I'm sorry," she said. "It appears someone recently requested a credit. Verification using your information." My stomach tightened. When? She gave me the date, 8 months earlier, exactly when the apartment lease had been signed. Was the application approved? No. It was withdrawn before completion. But the inquiry remains on your credit history. I thanked her, hung up, then immediately called Meredith. They didn't stop at the lease. What happened? They tried to finance something in my name. Silence. Then Meredith spoke. "Send me everything." The next morning we met again. Daniel was already building a timeline on the whiteboard. Lease, transfers, forgery, credit inquiry, apartment, messages, fertility clinic. He stepped back. "We've been looking at this as an affair." He crossed out the words. Then wrote something else. Financial strategy. He looked directly at me. Weston didn't just betray his marriage. He built a long-term exit plan. Meredith nodded, and every piece depended on one assumption. Which was? That you'd never start asking questions. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Small, calm, certain. They made one mistake. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What mistake? They underestimated the woman who managed every dollar in this family. Daniel smiled for the first time. I was hoping you'd say that. He opened one final folder. I've been saving this. Inside was a guest list. The annual black tie reception where Weston's promotion would be announced. The event he'd spent 2 years working toward. Daniel looked at Meredith, then back at me. If everything stays on schedule, he tapped the guest list. Your husband will believe he's won. Meredith slowly closed the folder. And that's exactly when we'll make sure he loses everything. For the next 3 weeks, I became an actress. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted the truth to finish revealing itself before anyone realized. I was watching. Every morning, Weston kissed me goodbye. Every evening, he came home carrying takeout or talking about work. Sometimes he complained about clients. Sometimes he talked excitedly about becoming a senior partner. Sometimes he even apologized for being so busy lately. I promise, he said one Friday night while folding laundry beside me. After the promotion, everything slows down. I looked at him. You've said that before. I know. This time I mean it. For the first time since the hospital, I realized something. He wasn't lying about wanting everything to change after the promotion. He just wasn't planning for me to be part of that future. Daniel's investigation continued quietly. Unlike television detectives, he didn't burst into rooms or chase suspects. He waited. Watched, collected facts. Every photograph. Every receipt. Every parking record. Every transfer. By the end of the month, he had built a timeline so detailed that you could follow Weston's movements almost hour by hour. Monday mornings, breakfast near the apartment. Tuesday evenings, dinner with Deline and Beckett. Thursday nights, stayed until after midnight. Friday mornings, left early enough to arrive at our house before I woke up. It was almost mechanical, a routine practiced hundreds of times. Then Daniel uncovered something unexpected. He called while I was leaving work. I need to show you something. An hour later, Meredith and I sat across from him in his office. He placed several photographs on the table. Weston, Deline, Beckett. Nothing new. Then another picture. My mother, standing outside the apartment, holding grocery bags. I frowned. She visited? Daniel nodded. Almost every week. He laid out more photographs. Karen carrying diapers. Karen pushing Beckett's stroller through a nearby park. Karen unlocking the apartment building with her own key. I looked at Meredith. My mother had a key? Daniel answered quietly. She wasn't visiting. She helped run that household. The realization hurt more than I expected. Somewhere inside me, I'd still believed my mother had simply chosen to lean over me. Painful, but familiar. This was different. She hadn't just known. She had participated. She had babysat, cooked meals, accepted gifts, celebrated birthdays, all while sitting across from me every Sunday pretending nothing had changed. For years, I'd wondered why. Mom suddenly stopped asking when Weston and I would try IVF again. Now I knew. She already had the grandchild she'd wanted. She just hadn't wanted him with me. The annual partnership reception was now 12 days away. Weston became almost obsessive. New suits, speech practice, phone calls late into the evening. He checked emails constantly. He wanted everything to be perfect. One night he stood in front of the bedroom mirror adjusting his tie. "What do you think?" "You'll look great." He smiled. "I've waited years for this." "I know." He turned toward me. "I couldn't have done it without you." The words landed like ice. Technically, he was telling the truth. Without my income, there would have been no apartment. Without my savings, there would have been no nursery. Without my name, there would have been no lease. Everything he had built had been built using me. 3 days before the reception, Meredith called. The firm's general counsel agreed to meet. I blinked. Already? We're not accusing anyone. We're presenting documented financial concerns involving one of their incoming partners. Professionally. No drama. No surprises. They'll receive everything the morning after the reception. Why afterward? She smiled. Because if we send it now, they postpone the promotion. If we wait, they'll announce him publicly, then discover who they've actually promoted. I understood immediately. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about consequences. The firm would investigate far more, aggressively if they'd already attached their reputation to him. Daniel added one final piece. He'd managed to identify every transfer made from our joint investment account. Not just the $60,000 I'd already found. There were smaller withdrawals. Cash, gift cards, travel reimbursements, hotel bookings, hidden among hundreds of ordinary expenses. When everything was added together, the amount reached almost $93,000. I stared at the total. Nearly 6 years of careful investing. Gone. Daniel looked at me. "I think this is the real number." So do I. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of the money, because I kept thinking about who I'd been before all this. The woman excitedly shopping for baby blankets. The woman defending her husband whenever friends asked questions. The woman blaming herself after every miscarriage. She hadn't been foolish. She'd been loyal. There was a difference. People often confuse the two. I never would again. The morning of the reception arrived. Weston looked happier than I'd seen him in years. He walked downstairs carrying 2 garment bags. One held his tuxedo, the other, my emerald evening gown. He'd bought it for my birthday 2 years earlier. "You still have this?" I smiled. "It's beautiful. You always look incredible in green." For a second, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. Or maybe I saw the man he'd always pretended to be. The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Partners, judges, bank executives, developers, city officials. Nearly 400 guests. Everyone shook Weston's hand, congratulated him in advance, called him future partner. He introduced me proudly. My wife, Adeline. The word almost amused me. How easily it came to him. How easily he'd planned to erase it. During dinner, I noticed something. Across the ballroom stood the firm's general counsel. He smiled politely as he greeted guests, completely unaware that by this time tomorrow, his desk would contain a package capable of changing the future of one of the firm's newest partners. Meredith had prepared every document with extraordinary precision. Not emotional accusations, evidence, forensic handwriting analysis, financial timelines, bank records, property documents, identity fraud concerns, everything cross-referenced, everything verified, facts, nothing more, nothing less. Near the end of the evening, the managing partner stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he smiled warmly, "tonight we recognize exceptional leadership." Applause filled the ballroom. Several names were announced. Then, "Please join me in congratulating our newest senior partner." Weston Hale. The room erupted. Weston looked at me. His eyes shone with pride. He squeezed my hand. We did it. I smiled. Yes, we did. He walked toward the stage beneath a standing ovation, accepted the plaque, shook hands, posed for photographs for several minutes. He looked exactly like the man he'd always dreamed of becoming. Successful, respected, untouchable. He had absolutely no idea that less than 12 hours from now, the first phone call would arrive, and by the end of that same week, everything he'd spent years building would begin collapsing one document at a time. The next morning began like every other weekday. Weston left the house at 7:15. He kissed my cheek. I'll probably be home late. Celebration dinner? He grinned. The partners want to take me out. You've earned it. I finally made it. I smiled as he walked toward the front door. Congratulations. He turned back. Thank you for believing in me. The door closed behind him. I waited exactly 30 seconds. Then I picked up my phone. It's done, I told Meredith. She glanced at the clock. Perfect. At precisely 8:00 a.m., the courier entered the law offices of Hale, Morrison, and Grant carrying a sealed envelope addressed to the firm's general counsel. Inside was everything. Not assumptions, not accusations, evidence, the handwriting analysis, the forged lease, bank records documenting nearly $93,000 diverted from joint marital accounts, credit inquiries made using my identity, photographs, financial timelines, copies of messages, every page indexed, every document authenticated. By 8:17, the envelope was on the general counsel's desk. I tried working that morning. I answered emails, approved a marketing proposal, joined a conference call, but every few minutes my eyes drifted toward my phone. At 10:42, Meredith texted. They've started reviewing it. At 11:19, another message. General counsel requested Weston immediately. No explanation, no details, just those 5 words. I imagined him walking confidently into that office, probably assuming they wanted to congratulate him. Instead, someone placed a copy of the lease in front of him. Later, I learned what happened from documents produced during the divorce. The meeting had begun politely, routine, professional. The general counsel thanked Weston for coming, asked whether he recognized the lease agreement. Weston had smiled, said yes. Then came the next question. Did your wife knowingly co-sign this lease? According to the meeting notes, that was the exact moment his confidence changed. He answered yes. The attorney slid the forensic handwriting report across the desk. I'd like you to read page 6. Silence followed. Then another question. Would you like to revise your answer? At 2:30 that afternoon, Weston called me. I let it ring. He called again. And again. By the 5th call, I answered. His breathing was uneven. Did someone contact you? No. They're asking questions. I see. They think... He stopped himself, then tried again. They've misunderstood some paperwork. I looked out my office window. I hope you're able to clear that up. Addie, his voice softened. If anyone asks you about the apartment, there it was. Not concern, strategy. He wasn't calling because he regretted lying. He was calling to coordinate the next lie. I interrupted him. I'm in a meeting. Then I hung up. By Wednesday morning, his company email had been suspended. His building access card no longer worked. His assistant was instructed to cancel every client meeting on his calendar. He was placed on paid administrative leave pending an internal investigation. News spread quickly, not publicly. Law firms are careful. But inside the office, everyone noticed. The man who had stood on stage accepting applause 2 nights earlier was suddenly gone. Daniel called that afternoon. I heard something interesting. What? The accounting department started reviewing his expense reports. I frowned. Why? Because once investigators begin looking, they keep looking. And? They found inconsistencies unrelated to your case. Expense reimbursements, inflated travel claims, personal meals billed as client dinners, small things, individually. None of them would have ended a career. Together, they painted a picture. A man comfortable bending rules. The forged lease no longer looked like an isolated mistake. It looked like a habit. Weston came home before sunset. He looked exhausted. His tie hung loose around his neck. Dark circles framed his eyes. For the first time in years, he looked frightened. He stood in the kitchen watching me prepare dinner. Finally, he spoke. They suspended me. I kept slicing vegetables. I'm sorry to hear that. He stared. That's all you're going to say? What would you like me to say? I don't know. Maybe ask what happened. I finally looked at him. What happened? They're investigating me. I see. He took a shaky breath. They think someone forged documents. I nodded once. They're right. His entire body went still. He looked at me for several long seconds. What did you just say? I placed the knife on the cutting board. They're right. Silence. I know about the apartment. Nothing. I know about the transfers. His face drained of color. I know Beckett is your son. He staggered backward until he reached the kitchen island. And I know, I said quietly, that my signature on that lease isn't mine. For nearly 10 seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he whispered, How long? Since the hospital. The hospital... Delene's delivery. Realization spread across his face. You were there. I heard everything. His shoulders slumped. Everything he'd spent years hiding had collapsed because of one door left slightly open. He sat down heavily. I can explain. I shook my head. No, it isn't what you think. It is exactly what I think. He buried his face in his hands. I never wanted to hurt you. I almost smiled. You didn't accidentally hurt me. You planned around me. His head lifted slowly. There's a difference. He had no answer. Because there wasn't one. I loved you. His voice cracked. I believe you. He looked surprised. I think you loved me once. But somewhere along the way, you started loving what I provided more. Our house. My salary. My stability. My credit. My name. You didn't keep me because you couldn't leave. You kept me because leaving would have been expensive. Tears filled his eyes. Mine remained dry. I had already cried in the parking garage. There was nothing left. The next morning, Meredith filed for divorce. Attached to the petition were more than 200 pages of supporting documents. The forged lease, financial records, bank statements, forensic reports. Every fact carefully organized. No dramatic language, just evidence. When Weston was served, he didn't contest a single page. Because he couldn't. The document spoke more clearly than either of us ever could. 2 days later, the firm's investigation reached its conclusion. Weston Hale's employment was terminated. His newly awarded partnership was revoked before it officially took effect. His name disappeared from the firm's website before the end of the business day. The title he'd sacrificed everything to obtain lasted less than 72 hours. But the hardest conversation of all was still waiting, and it would take place in my mother's dining room, where for the first time in my life, everyone would finally be forced to hear the truth. I had no intention of seeing my mother again. Not anytime soon, not after everything I'd learned, but life has a way of arranging confrontations long before you're emotionally ready for them. 3 weeks after Weston moved into a temporary apartment, my mother called. For the first time in almost a month, I answered. Hello? Her voice sounded almost cheerful. Sunday is Beckett's naming celebration. I said nothing. I'd like you to come. There it was. Not I miss you. Not can we talk? Not I'm sorry. Just another family event. Another expectation. Another role I was supposed to quietly step back into. I don't think that's appropriate. It would mean a lot to Delene. I almost laughed. Would it? A pause. Please, Adeline. We're still family. I looked out my office window. No. We used to be. Then I ended the call. An hour later, Meredith called. I heard your mother invited you. How did you know? Because Weston told his attorney you probably wouldn't attend. I frowned. Why does that matter? It matters because everyone expects you to disappear. So, Meredith leaned forward. Sometimes the strongest statement isn't staying away. It's showing up. I hated that she was right. For 2 days, I argued with myself. Part of me wanted to cut every connection forever. Another part realized that leaving quietly would allow them to tell their own version of events. Eventually, I decided I would go. Not for them. Not for Beckett. For myself. Sunday afternoon arrived warm and cloudless. My mother's backyard looked like something from a lifestyle magazine. White tents, fresh flowers, blue balloons, a long table filled with catered food, nearly 40 guests, neighbors, extended family, church friends, people who still believed we were one happy family. When I stepped through the gate, the conversation paused, just briefly, then resumed. Smiles, small talk, Careful politeness. No one mentioned Weston. Karen hurried toward me. For a second, I thought she might hug me. Instead, she adjusted the sleeve of my dress. I'm glad you came. I almost didn't. She forced a smile. Let's not make today difficult. I looked directly into her eyes. I didn't. There wasn't a trace of guilt in hers, only anxiety. Not about what she'd done, about what I might say. Deline stood beneath a white canopy holding Beckett. He was beautiful. Round cheeks, dark hair, wide curious eyes. He looked at me for several seconds before smiling. Completely innocent, completely unaware. I walked over slowly. He's gotten bigger. She nodded. He has... Awkward silence settled between us. Finally, she whispered, I'm sorry things became so complicated. I looked at her. Complicated? She lowered her eyes. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. I answered quietly. You had 2 years to decide that. She didn't reply. Across the yard, I noticed Weston. He looked thinner. His expensive confidence had disappeared. Without the tailored suits and constant smile, he suddenly looked older. He started walking toward me. Karen immediately stepped between us. Not today. He stopped. For once, he listened. Lunch passed in careful conversation. No one mentioned the divorce. No one mentioned the investigation. It was almost impressive. 40 adults pretending the largest scandal they'd ever witnessed simply didn't exist. Then Karen stood, tapped her glass gently. I just want to thank everyone for being here today. She smiled toward Deline. Our family has been through challenges, but today reminds us that love always finds a way. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was again. The family story, neatly edited, polished, every uncomfortable truth quietly removed. Karen lifted her champagne glass. To family. Everyone raised theirs, including me. I stood slowly. To family. The yard became quiet. People turned toward me. I smiled politely. I've been thinking a lot about that word lately. Karen's expression changed immediately. Concern, not regret. Concern. I've realized something. I looked around the table. Family isn't the people who share your last name. It's the people who refuse to use your trust as currency. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I continued calmly. I hope Beckett grows up surrounded by honesty, because every child deserves that. I turned toward my mother. And I hope someday the adults in his life understand the difference between protecting a child and protecting a lie. The silence became absolute. Then I looked at Weston. I've already forgiven myself. He frowned. For what? For believing you. Then I looked at Deline. And I've forgiven Beckett for being born into decisions he never made. Finally, I looked at my mother. But forgiveness isn't the same thing as reconciliation. Karen finally spoke. You've embarrassed this family enough. I nodded slowly. No. I embarrassed no one. I simply stopped carrying your secrets. A cousin shifted uncomfortably. Someone quietly set down a fork. Karen's face flushed. This isn't the time. I smiled. Exactly. There was never a time. That's why we're here. Weston suddenly stood. Adeline. His voice trembled. Please. Can we talk privately? I shook my head. We've spent years speaking privately. Look where that got us. He stepped closer. I made mistakes. I met his eyes. No. You made decisions. Mistakes happen once. You repeated yours for years. Karen tried one last time. You could have handled this differently. I nodded. I did. I handled it privately. For weeks. I never called your friends. I never posted online. I never walked into the hospital room. I simply allowed the truth to arrive exactly where your lies had taken it. No one defended them. Not one person. Because no one could. I placed my untouched champagne glass on the table. Then I walked toward Beckett one last time. He reached for my finger. Tiny. Trusting. I let him hold it for a moment. I hope you're happy, I whispered. I really do. Then I kissed the top of his head. Not because of his parents, despite them. As I walked toward my car, my phone began vibrating. Karen. I ignored it. Again. By the time I reached home, she had called 11 times. Weston had called 4. Deline had sent one message. You didn't have to do this in front of everyone. I stared at it, then locked my phone without answering. Because for the first time in my life, I understood something that changed everything. The people who spend years lying to you almost always believe the real betrayal begins. The moment you tell the truth, people often imagine that revenge feels loud, that it arrives with shouting, slamming doors, public humiliation, a dramatic courtroom speech. Real life isn't like that. The most permanent consequences usually arrive quietly. One letter, one email, one signature, one decision after another. By the time people realize everything has changed, it's already over. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Weston didn't contest it. There wasn't much left to argue about. The financial records were clear. The forensic handwriting report spoke for itself. Every transfer had a date. Every withdrawal left a trail. Every lie eventually met a document that refused to support it. Meredith often joked that the easiest cases weren't the ones with the most emotion. They were the ones with the best paperwork. Mine had become one of those. The settlement wasn't glamorous. No one walked away rich. That's not how divorce usually works. But it was fair. The townhouse remained mine. My retirement account stayed untouched. The money taken from our joint investments was accounted for during the property settlement. More importantly, my name was formally removed from every document connected to the apartment. The forged lease was declared invalid. For the first time in over a year, my financial life belonged only to me again. The leasing company conducted its own internal review. They never told me exactly what disciplinary action they took. They weren't required to, but one executive did call personally. I wanted to apologize. His voice carried genuine embarrassment. We should have caught it. I thanked him. Not because an apology erased anything, because accountability mattered, even when it came late. The firm's internal investigation ended a few weeks after the divorce. Weston's employment remained terminated. The partnership announcement was quietly removed from the firm's website. His photograph disappeared from promotional materials. Clients who had been assigned to him were transferred elsewhere. Business continued. Law firms are surprisingly efficient at moving forward. Buildings don't collapse because one partner leaves. They simply replace the name on the office door. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Weston eventually found work at a much smaller company. Nothing prestigious, nothing close to what he'd spent years pursuing. For a while, I wondered whether that knowledge would make me feel satisfied. It didn't. It simply felt finished. There is a strange kind of peace that comes when someone's consequences no longer require your attention. Deline never contacted me again. Not after the naming ceremony. Not after the divorce. Not after everything became public within the family. Months later, one of my cousins quietly mentioned she'd moved to another suburb with Beckett. Weston visited regularly. Whether they were together or simply trying to co-parent, I honestly didn't know. And for the first time in years, I realized I no longer cared. My mother tried longer. She left messages every few weeks. Sometimes angry. Sometimes tearful. Sometimes pretending nothing had happened. One voicemail stayed with me. Families forgive each other. I listened to it twice, then deleted it. Families also tell the truth. That part had somehow escaped her definition. Almost a year after the hospital, I received one final letter. Not from Weston. Not from my mother. From my father's older brother, Uncle Richard. We'd never been especially close. Inside was a handwritten note. Your father used to say that you were the strongest person in the family, not because you never cried, but because you always chose integrity over comfort. I think he would be proud of the woman you've become. There was no lecture. No request to reconcile. Just those words. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my desk drawer. For some reason, that simple note healed something years of apologies never could have. Life became unexpectedly ordinary. I accepted the executive position at work that I'd postponed twice because I didn't want additional travel while trying to save my marriage. Now there was nothing left to postpone. The promotion meant longer hours, more responsibility, more flights. But every achievement finally belonged entirely to me. No one was quietly draining my accounts. No one was building another life behind my back. Every step forward was actually mine. On Saturday mornings, I started running again. The first mile was miserable. The second wasn't much better. By the third week, my lungs remembered what hope felt like. One morning, after finishing a 5-mile run, I bought myself coffee and sat in the same neighborhood, park where I'd once cried after another failed fertility appointment. The park hadn't changed. That realization made me smile. One afternoon, nearly a year after everything began, I opened a closet while looking for winter boots. Behind an old storage box sat the gift bag I'd carried to the hospital. I'd forgotten I'd kept it. The wrapping paper was slightly wrinkled. The wooden keepsake box remained unopened. So did the embroidered blanket. I sat on the floor holding it for a long time, not crying, just remembering. Then I folded the blanket carefully and placed it in a donation box for the children's hospital. Some family somewhere would wrap a newborn in it, a baby whose life wasn't built on secrets. That felt right. People sometimes ask whether I hate Weston. The honest answer surprises them. I don't. Hate requires a relationship, attention, energy. He no longer occupies enough space in my life for any of those things. What I feel is something much quieter. Gratitude for the lesson, not the betrayal. Never the betrayal. The lesson. Because losing the wrong people made room for the right life. If I could speak to the woman standing outside room 412 that afternoon, still holding a baby gift with hope written all over her face, I'd tell her only one thing. Walk away. Don't open the door. Don't argue. Don't beg for explanations. Some truths don't need clarification. They need witnesses. You heard enough. Now go build a life where no one has to convince you that you're worth choosing. A few months ago, I ran into Marisol from work. We were waiting in line at a coffee shop. She smiled. You look different. I got a haircut. She laughed. It's not your hair. She studied me for another second. You look lighter. I thought about that all afternoon. She was right. Not happier every single day. Not magically healed. Just lighter. Because carrying your own future is surprisingly easy. Once you stop carrying everyone else's lies, sometimes people assume strength is the moment you finally confront those who hurt you. I don't think that's true anymore. Strength is what happens before that. It's the quiet decision made in a hospital hallway. The choice to remain calm when chaos would be easier. The patience to collect facts instead of chasing revenge. The courage to leave with your dignity before someone convinces you to bargain it away. Weston believed my greatest weakness was that I trusted too much. My mother believed it was that I always kept the peace. Deline believed I would never fight back. They were all wrong. Because the qualities they mistook for weakness, discipline, patience, kindness, became the very things that saved me. They tried to erase me from my own life. Instead, they erased themselves from it. And in the end, the only name that remained on the front door was mine.